From there, I've had an opportunity to go on and work with many, many partners throughout Eastern Oregon, helping businesses grow all the way from Hermiston to Ontario to Burns to Fossil, throughout all of Eastern Oregon. And it's really my pleasure to bring this instruction into town today so each of us can learn from each other and hopefully get our businesses back on track as we get through this economic disaster. Now, one of the things I want to share with you is these 3 webinars that we're going to go through over the next 3 weeks are going to be very elementary in nature, but the goal of these webinars is to help move us down a path to where we can learn more about how to manage our small business and then how to obtain the resources to take next steps. So today's webinar, today, May 12th, is Get Your Financial House in Order. On May 19th, we're going to take time to prepare and oversee a cash flow budget. And it's an exciting class next week because you're going to be the business owner, I'm going to be your manager, and we're going to go step by step through what does it take to prepare that cash flow budget so you can make good decisions in your business's daily life. And then on May 26th, we're going to have one more class in this 3-part webinar series, and that is, what is a financial statement? How do I prepare one? And for a lot of folks who are using QuickBooks or Quicken or other software programs, how do I read those financial statements? And what we're going to do is we're going to take some of those advanced topics and we're going to break it down to an 8th grade level so we can all understand our financial position much clearer. So here's what we're going to do today. We're going to go through a handful of concepts on the front end. Many of you are going to scratch your head and say, what does this have to do with me managing my checkbook? What does this have to do with me getting my financial house in order? Here's what I need you to do though. I need you to hang with me for 15 minutes because some of the basic principles I'm going to introduce on the front end, while they may have nothing to do with money, in a few minutes are really going to help you to understand your company and your personal cash position. So, one of the first things I want to share with you is a book that was written back in the 80s by a gentleman by the name of Dr. Stephen R. Covey. The book was entitled The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And interestingly enough, not only was it a New York Times bestseller for a decade, the Library of Commerce actually said is one of the 100 most influential books ever written. You think about that. There's a lot of books that have been written over the centuries. To have the 7 habits of highly effective people be one of 100, that's pretty powerful. It's something we should take note of, and I would encourage all of you to go purchase this book, to read this book, and to study this book. The first 3 sections of the 7 habits of highly effective people talk about 3 habits that all successful people and or businesses implement in their daily life. The very first habit is successful people are proactive. What does proactive mean? Well, proactive is the opposite of reactive. We all know those business owners, and I have to share with you, I'm probably the most guilty, that every day reacts to the crisis at hand. And they get hit by a wave, and they get hit by a wave, and they get hit by a wave, and then they're shocked when they get hit by another wave. Well, successful people know the next wave's coming, and they prepare for it. We're going to talk more about that in a moment, especially as it relates to your checkbook. The second habit that Dr. Covey talks about is successful people and successful businesses begin with the end in mind. Begin with the end in mind. What does that mean? What it means is successful businesses know where they want to be. They know where they want to be in 20 years, and they know how to get there because they set up steps or benchmarks or markers to help them identify where that end is. So one of the things that I always suggest with small business owners is sit down and identify where do you want to be in 20 years, then where do you need to be in 15 years, and where do you need to be in 10 years, 5 years, how about 1 year from now? In this economic disaster, it's really hard to plan, but you know what? Rather than being reactive, we can at least try to take proactive steps to figure out over the next 365 days, what can we be doing? And then you know what? We need to break it down even further and figure out where do we need to be in 30 days? What about today? What can we be doing today to move us closer to our financial goal 20 years from now? Dr. Covey recognized that successful business owners begin with the end in mind. And then the third habit of the 7 that he discusses is they put first things first. And that's going to lead us into financial management today. Are we taking the dollar we have and are we prioritizing it correctly? Are we going out and buying a toy? Or are we going out and buying an asset that will bring value to us in the future? What's our goal? Is our goal financial independence? Or is our goal to have the coolest toy? Now, I can't answer that, but based upon beginning with the end in mind, you've got to figure out how to put first things first. All right. Now, we talked about being proactive. We talked about beginning with the end in the mind, and we talked about putting first things first. What does that have to do with my checkbook? What does that have to do with me getting organized? I have to share with everyone really quick before I move on. We've got a special friend on the line named Brian Wolf. Brian, we're glad you're on the line and appreciate all you do for all of Eastern Oregon. So today's webinar, as we talked about, is getting your financial house in order. And we know that we have to be proactive. How many business owners out there at the end of the day are like, my goodness, I don't want to do the checkbook. I don't want to put the bills into QuickBooks. I don't want to get the invoices out. Well, we have to remember, it's your business. No one else is going to do it for you. And tomorrow, the burdens are not going to go away. Part of reminding ourselves that we don't want to be reactive, we want to be proactive. And so we have to take that initiative. So, how do we get organized? Well, the first thing we have to do is recognize success in financial management comes by breaking big concepts down to the smallest parts. And that's really where the next 20 minutes we're going to focus. What are those small little steps we can take to get to where we want our business in 20 years? So the first thing we have to do is we have to get organized. We have to get organized. And for a lot of folks, again, including myself, that's not a fun activity. How do we get organized? Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to figure out where is our current financial situation or our position. How do we do that? Well, we need to go gather up all the information we have about our business and get it together, and we're going to put it out on the dining room table. We're going to put it out on the conference room table. Me, I like to work on the floor, actually, and so we're going to put it out on the floor. And so the first thing I would ask you as a small business owner to do, if you're attempting to get organized, is go find all your receipts. Go find them all. Get them all. Then begin to separate them out. And we're going to talk about how you separate them out here in a few minutes, because there's different strategies as to why you get organized. We'll talk about that in a moment. But go get all your receipts. The second step take a drink here real quick. The second step, after you get all of your receipts, is I want you to break them out into those general categories. These are my fuel receipts. These are my receipts for purchasing fertilizer. Here are my receipts for purchasing equipment. And we break them out into those categories. Why do we do that? Well, part of being organized is to know where we stand. Quite often, I'll watch businesses who fail, not because they're not successful in what they do, just because they mismanage their money because they don't know where they are. We get our receipts. Second thing I want you to do, and again, this sounds very elementary, but you'd be shocked how many businesses don't do it. Go get the balances on all your debts, whether it's credit cards or whether it's revolving debt, a car loan, I don't know, a four-wheeler loan. Get all those balances and know what they are. And then if you have any mortgage debt, let's figure out what that is. Any and all debts, let's figure out what they are. And then you know what we're going to do? We're going to rank them based upon the cost to you in terms of interest. And we're going to talk about that more in a moment because we want to make sure that we're making interest work for you, not against you. So we're going to go get our receipts. We're going to get our debt balances, whether it's credit or consumer or mortgages, or maybe it's our vendor obligations we have, our accounts payable. Maybe it's debts we owe to utilities. We're going to get them all together though. And then once again, we're going to rank them based upon the expense cost, the interest cost. From there, what we want to do is we want to create a strategy to where once we're organized and once we know what our obligations are, how do we keep track of it every month? Now, there's a lot of different bookkeeping systems out there. Some of the very best ones I've ever seen, and some folks will just say, Greg, I can't believe you're saying this. It's paper and ink, where they know how to keep ledger columns on a piece of paper, and it works for them. It's very tidy, it's very organized, and it's very simple. And then you go down the spectrum, and you have options like QuickBooks and Intuitive and those type of programs. From there, which by the way, QuickBooks is a fabulous program. And a lot of small business owners get scared about using QuickBooks because they think, oh my goodness, it's double entry bookkeeping or double entry accounting. Let me share with you, there's a lot of webinars out there and there's a lot of good ones, especially focused on QuickBooks. Give me a call. I can help you get into a QuickBooks class that's elementary and we'll get you right on track. So we've got bookkeeping systems all the way from paper and ink to QuickBooks. I'll share with you another option is a paid bookkeeper. And a lot of small business owners frown or shy away from a bookkeeper at first. But I'll tell you what, you find the right bookkeeper and they pay for themselves. They pay for themselves and they bring efficiency to your operation and they allow your business to focus on what it does best. Rather than worrying about the books, you can worry about making sure your customers get the service they need. Then, following the paper and ink, or the QuickBooks, or the paid bookkeeper, as your business matures, then you could start thinking about an accountant. Or you could go from QuickBooks to an accountant, depending upon your comfort level. The reason I share this with you today is because there's many options available to you. Okay, now, one of the things you're going to want to do once you're organized, you have your receipts spread out, you know where you've spent your money, you have to create a workable filing system. Okay, it's not enough to get organized once. Remember we talked about earlier about beginning with the end in mind and being proactive? Well, part of being proactive is having that workable file system. So reach out, do some homework, and let's figure out what is that workable file system. Again, I'm available, my team's available. We'll sit down with you and work one-on-one to help you get the information you need. Now, I want to talk to you about some categories you should consider as you're putting together your filing system. But let me push pause on that really quick before I do this. Do you know why you're planning? Are you planning for daily cash flow management to make sure you can just keep the lights on? Or are you managing, or are you budgeting and planning to reduce debt? Credit card debt, accounts payable, debts to vendors, debts on mortgages or auto loans. Is that why you're managing your cash? Are you doing it for tax management? That's a big issue for small business owners, not only making sure that they have daily cash for their cash flow needs, but also making sure at the end of 365 days, the IRS doesn't come and say, oh my goodness, you've got a problem. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. Other reasons you may want to put a budget together and start planning is for asset acquisition or for long-term savings and investments. So there's lots of things you can be planning and budgeting for, but let's make sure what we do is in line with what your needs are. Now, what are some of those categories? Let's talk about those. If I was putting a budget together, I would want to make sure there's basic elements that are included in my budget. But by the way, let's stop. Let's stop and think about this. If you are running a small business, what do you think is the very most important budget you should create first? I think the very first budget any entrepreneur should create is their own personal family budget. How much do you need to make sure you can keep the lights on at home, to keep the rent or mortgage paid, to make sure that little Timmy, has the Nikes he needs for playing basketball, because we all know if he doesn't have the right Nikes, he's not going to be able to play basketball. What if we, once the coronavirus goes away, we have a social night once a month? We need to create a personal budget, and we need to write it down. Why is having a personal budget so important to your business's cash flow? Because we have to know what is it going to take for the family, for the household, for you as a person to keep the lights on, in order to know what the business has to earn or retain to meet that need. And so there's a real synergy between a personal budget and a business budget that exists in Eastern Oregon. So we've got to keep that in mind. So here are these categories that I would think about. One are auto expenses. Are we tracking mileage? Are we tracking parking, fuel, tires? The IRS will allow you to either write off mileage or the actual expense of vehicle use. We need to make sure we're tracking that. By the way, well, I'll come back to that. Are we accounting for and tracking any equipment purchases, furniture, or supplies? Are we making sure we account for professional and legal expenses? By the way, back on auto expenses, when you go to visit me in the office, did you know that mileage is tax deductible? Or if you go from your business to another business, that mileage is tax deductible. Or say you have to go pick up a piece of equipment in Portland, that mileage is tax deductible. And let me share with you, those miles really add up. And so by being efficient in your bookkeeping and having a simple little method in place to track those type of expenses, it can mean huge savings for you and your business. Another expense that you want to be tracking is the expense to starting up your business or to growing your business. All those purchases you make, whether it's putting a frame on the wall or buying a new laptop, those are expenses that, in the eyes of the IRS, are tax deductible. The telephone and internet, your cell phone that you use for business, tax deductible. Education and training, when you attend a QuickBooks webinar to learn how to use QuickBooks, that's tax deductible. The interest on your loans, those credit cards we talked about, and how we're going to prioritize those so we know which ones to pay off first. Well, until we do pay them off, the interest on those loans, on those credit cards, is tax deductible. Entertainment and travel expenses, tax deductible, but you got to keep really excellent records, because this is where the IRS kind of looks at you and says, all right, was that personal or was it for business? And so one of the strategies I use is anytime I have a receipt, I try to write on it what it was used for. So that way, 3 years from now, if the IRS ever showed up at the Smith household, I'd be able to pull the receipt out and say, oh, this was for a meal at lunchtime with Patrick to discuss a small business loan. I hold it up, and I've now provided adequate documentation. Did you know insurance is tax deductible? And then also, one of the biggest tax deductions that a lot of folks don't take advantage of but should is the home-based business deduction. And we're going to want to talk more about that at a future webinar. But if you have a portion of your home that's dedicated solely for the purpose of operating your business, maybe doing your bookkeeping, you can write that off on your taxes. So we've talked about that we need to get our receipts in order. We need to separate them out by category. We need to separate our receipts from what's personal and what's business. We talked about the fact that we need to get a list of all of our debts, list them out so we know how much they are, what the monthly payment is, and what the interest expense is. From there, we then are going to create a cash flow budget, which will be next week's webinar. So, but you can't create that cash flow budget next week unless you know what those expenses are today. And so that's why we have to get organized. We have to get those receipts and figure out just how much did we really spend on fuel last year? How much did we really spend on telephone and internet and all those different social media platforms that we have to use? How much do we spend on that? We have to get it organized. We have to know our debts. We have to know what was the most important one. That's right, our personal family budget. Once we know our personal family budget and we know how much we're spending over in these other categories and what debts we owe, then we can figure out how to put a cash flow budget together to maximize those opportunities that include savings and investing, tax management, daily cash flow, debt reduction, and asset acquisition. See how all these different categories all can come back together to lead us into building a cash flow budget. Finally, I want to share just one or two thoughts with you as we leave. Remember what Dr. Covey shared in his 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. As a business owner, we must be proactive. We have to get off our hump, and we have to do some of those things we don't like to do. And for many business owners, especially those that are so skilled in their craft and numbers aren't their thing, they have to be proactive and figure out how to get organized. We have to begin with the end in mind. We have to recognize our business, if it's going to last the next 20 years, we have to know how we're going to get there, and we have to put first things first, making sure our priorities are in line with our business. All right, I'm going to close on this. I'll never forget when I was starting out my career years ago. I had a chance to work with some really, really impressive professional leaders throughout all of Eastern Oregon. University presidents, port managers, bank presidents. I was so blessed even one day to have the president of the Bank of Eastern Oregon call me up and say, Greg, we're jumping in a car, we're touring Eastern Oregon for the day. And he took me around, toured, and we just had a chance to visit. But the reason I share that with you is he gave me a great piece of advice. And that is, as you're building your small little business or building your small little personal life, surround yourself with smart, intelligent people who can help you get where you need to be. Whether that's an accountant or a bookkeeper, whether that's us and our team, which, by the way, we're here to assist you. It's free, it's confidential, and we'll provide all the one-on-one assistance that you need to get your business where it needs to be. But surround yourself with those type of folks. And finally, back on being proactive, give us a call, send us a message. We want to work with you. In this economic crisis, we can work with you over Zoom, we can work with you over the telephone, we can put a screen in front and be in a conference room with separation. But we want to go into the details on how to help you with your financial bookkeeping. All right, next week, same bat time, same bat channel. We're going to take the information we learned today and we're going to prepare a cash flow budget. After that, the following week, we're going to analyze financial statements. What are they? How do I read them? And how do I make sure they really, really are working for my business? I hope everyone remains safe. I hope everyone had a wonderful lunchtime today, and we will see you soon. Bye.